Sometimes the most profound spiritual experiences come from the most unexpected places. For centuries, cultures around the world have turned to sacred plants and substances to explore consciousness, seek healing, and connect with the divine. Today, science is catching up, rediscovering what ancient wisdom has long known, that there may be more to reality and to ourselves than meets the eye. Welcome to We Have a Spiritual Problem, a podcast where we confront the deeper questions beneath our personal struggles and collective crises. I am your host, Dr. Jeff Armstrong. I am not a theologian or a philosopher, or at least by training. I am a PhD exercise physiologist with an interest in the intersection of the physical and the spiritual. In this episode, we explore the fascinating and sometimes controversial world of psilocybin. Yes, the active compound in what many call magic mushrooms, and its potential for spiritual growth, healing, and transformation. I also share my own recent experience in Colorado, where I was joined by my two incredible guests, Sandi Griffin and Sam Stroman. Together, we'll discuss not only the science and spirituality of psilocybin, but also the deeply personal side of encountering the unknown within ourselves. This is a conversation about curiosity, courage, and the search for meaning. One that might challenge what you think you know about spirituality and healing in the modern world. Sandi and Sam, welcome to We Have a Spiritual Problem. We're going to have quite a conversation today and share a lot of personal experience. But before we start, I want you just to kind of both introduce yourselves a little bit. Sandi, you have been on this podcast before, so hopefully our regular listeners and viewers know a little bit about you. And certainly anybody who listens to the Aging Well podcast knows you very well. But Sam's a new face on this podcast. So who wants to go? We'll go ladies before gentlemen. I'm old school. So Sandi, tell us about yourself.
So yeah, I'm a fitness coach by trade. I just love getting to work with people and hearing their stories. And I think through my life, just my spirituality has changed from what I was kind of programmed and raised with to what I've experienced as a wife, a mother, a friend, a coach, just another human being on this planet. And I don't really have a title that I like to give myself, but I believe I'm called to love and serve people.
Awesome. What about you, Sam? Tell us about yourself.
So, my relationship, with the Lord and has started from a young age. I actually had a conversation with my mother not too long ago, and she was explaining to me how when she was pregnant with me, she was speaking in tongues. And the nurse came in and she said, "Well, what language is that?" She didn't even know. So I grew up in the church as a Christian for about the first 5 to 8 years. And then we didn't go as much. My mother and father actually separated when I was 2. And I think that was one of the big reasons why she got into the church the way she did, was because she needed a place of refuge and support, because she was a domestic violence survivor, and she had to deal with raising me and my sister on her own. So that was her way of getting that support that she needed. I eventually ended up going into the military. I left when I was 17, and honestly, my whole life has been faith driven, to be honest with you. I left everything I knew, everything I loved at 17 years old, and only through my relationship, with Christ and that spirituality that I was able to achieve allowed me to achieve that. And that's kind of how I live my life. And it's not always, to the, in the best light, right? But I still have my personal relationship, and that's what kind of guides me through life and allows me to be where I am today.
For both of you, when you hear the phrase, and the title of this podcast is We Have a Spiritual Problem, when you hear that phrase, we have a spiritual problem, what does that mean to you, or how does that resonate with you?
I'll let you go, Sandi.
I feel like as created beings, we have drawn too many lines in the sand and have isolated ourselves, isolated others from what love and service actually means. If you look at the fundamental of any faith, any religion, any spiritual practice, it's to care for one another. And I truly believe that comes down to love and service. If we truly care at the heart of who we are as human beings and serve one another to make sure that no one goes without, to make sure everyone they don't feel lonely. Some of the simplest things. then nothing else matters. But we have created, and I say we, meaning religion, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but these faith groups have established so many rules and regulations, and we're different from this one because of this. And if they don't believe this, then they can't be a part of our club type of thing. We've drawn too many lines in the sand and set up too many walls and barriers and rules and regulations that we forget the simplest piece of every fundamental, going back millennia, is to love and serve one another and care for one another. And I think that's the biggest problem I see.
Now, Sam, it's your
Yeah,
turn.
yeah, I believe that as well. So I've had the chance to live overseas for 10 years, right? And I've done 6 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. So I've lived with a bunch of different religions and a bunch of different faith base. And what I found is there's a commonality, even though we have such different, religions, and we're put in these different boxes. At the end of the day, we're all really the same, and we have those commonalities through just the basic caring and loving for each other. Like Sandy mentioned, just having that natural human aspect of it, being human and just wanting to care for people and really look out for each other. So when I did see we have a spiritual problem, I think it's more, on a personal level, right? So I feel like people need to kind of get in tune with themselves and how they live their lives, and what type of form that they choose and path, and at any scale, right? I feel like it could be at any level, however you choose the path, but I think it definitely needs to be addressed.
So do the both of you see connections between spirituality or the lack thereof in issues like mental health, social isolation, or polarization?
I absolutely have seen that for as long as I can remember. And Griff, my husband, had a really interesting way of describing that I could understand, because he grew up in a very different family situation than I did. And his dad was an outlaw biker in a gang. And they would call it going to church for their business meetings. And he's like, a motorcycle gang or a Christian church is no different. These people are looking for a place to belong. They're looking for someone to protect them, to love them, to make sure that they don't do without, and that they have a community of people that are like-minded. And I really started to see that, especially later in my journey. I was a worship leader for 20 years. And as I kind of started stepping away from that from various reasons, I started to really see that. And mental health, I think, absolutely plays a huge part in that. We feel, especially, in recent years, post-COVID, there's so much isolation. There's so much, again, polarization between beliefs. You have to believe exactly what I believe, otherwise we can't get along. And we've lost the art of communication. We've lost the art of loving one another and asking or listening to understand versus listening to answer. And so I think that's why a lot of people are still very driven or attracted to these mega churches. It's a place to instantly be welcomed and belong, no matter what you've done, no matter how you live, no matter what your bank account looks like, for a certain period of time, until some of those things start falling down. And not just mega churches, but that's just an example. Here in Colorado Springs, we have a lot of, folks on the family headquarters, and a lot of large mega churches that have east, west, north, and south entrances to their worship center. So they are very large establishments, and it's a place where you instantly feel like I matter. When you walk in the door, you're going to get welcomed, you're going to get escorted, you're going to get treated very well. And I think a lot of people don't get that in just their day-to-day interactions. But for me, that's where spirituality really means something, is in those day-to-day one-on-one interactions, where this is who I am all the time. This is my character. This is my belief system that I live every day, every second. But it's hard for us to find that sometimes. So when you go to a place of community, you're instantly welcomed and instantly feel all those great things. It's a dopamine response. So, and then taking that even a step further, as a music worship leader, music plays on emotion. Music is you can really tug at someone's emotions and kind of use them as a puppet, if you will, with the right kind of music and upbeat to get people excited. And you bring it down to this really like intense, deep, feeling, and maybe maybe some guilt and shame, and with some of that with the lyrics and with the musics and the chords, and then you bring people back up and leave them on a high note. And I started to see how we could manipulate people in those settings as well.
And Sam, you are majoring in psychology. You work in psychiatric care. Forget exactly what capacity, and you can kind of share some of that. But you've also experienced what it's like to be kind of in the trenches of, not kind of in the trenches of war, and see the mental toll that plays on your comrades and your colleagues in the military. So how do you answer this question?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. For me, it was very personal. Like I said, my mother raised me and my sister. I didn't meet my father till I was 15. So she suffered depression really bad. And I noticed at the age of 5, I would come home and she'd be crying on the couch, and I'd be wondering, like, why are you crying? So being in the church, my thought is, well, if we're praising to God, and why is he allowing my mother to suffer like this? Right? So I had to kind of challenge myself to kind of grow up quick and to learn that you can't necessarily let your emotions control your actions. You can't let your emotions control your outcomes of your day. I didn't really understand it, right? Then fast forward going into the military, suicide was like one of the biggest causes of death. I want to say, I don't know the statistics, but 2019, there were more deaths in the year than there were in the whole Iraq war, in the Air Force. Like, that's just crazy, and I had to experience that first hand when I first got to my last base in Texas. We lost one, and I was there for 2 weeks. Serving as a superintendent, and we lost one of our troops to suicide. And it really hit hard because being in the military, I noticed that they try to just kind of push your feelings to the side. It was more of a stigmatism attached to getting mental health. Whenever, we try to get health, go seek and get health, we would kind of be looked at like, it was a problem. And then potentially there was areas where we wouldn't be able to get promoted because you were looked at like you can't hold that position if you're not mentally capable. But at the end of the day, it's just kind of a cry for help in a lot of times, right? So I feel like maybe that was one of the biggest reasons why suicide was so broad in the military. But then, alcohol abuse, plays a big part into how these troops are dealing with the different issues that they have, along with being, medicated with over-the-counter prescription drugs as well. So 2019 is when I had that suicide in my unit, and it really hit hard. They actually assigned us a therapist to speak with our unit she was assigned for six months. Okay, she was a therapist to come in and speak with the troops to kind of get a better feel of what was going on in the unit, and nobody wanted to speak to her because, again, there was that stigma that was associated with talking with a therapist. But I had a year before I was going to retire, so I was like, come on in, take a seat. I was like, at this point, it is what it is. So she actually really helped me reflect on my life, my childhood, the things I was dealing with, because I suffered from some PTSD, when I came back from the desert, and I was self-medicating, and I was cocktailing just to kind of just figure it out on my own. And she really helped. And what that in turn did is when I retired, I went to the community college here in Las Vegas, and I got my associates in applied psychology and mental health services. So since then, I've started my own practice, and right now I'm a qualified mental health associate. So I'm going to UNLV at the moment. I'm actually in my 3rd semester to get my degree in psychology because I want to know how these emotions and how our spirituality affects our actions, and how it all kind of plays together into one common goal.
So I think that's a good time to kind of lead us into really the purpose of today's discussion, to talk about the role that psilocybin, magic mushrooms, plant-based medicine, the medicine of our ancient ancestors can play in our mental health, in our spiritual health, and kind of our own experiences. And Sandi, you were kind of the first to experience this among us, and we'll talk about mine and Sam's recent visit to Colorado, and you took us after our first kind of experience with psilocybin. What does the access to mushrooms and plant-based medicine mean to you? What are your hopes for it as a treatment for spiritual and mental health? And then we'll kind of get into what happened to us on that mountaintop.
Yeah, my first experience was actually with someone I love and trust very, very much, and it had saved their life. Suicidal, just shy of an attempt. And just epic failure of our system to actually provide help. And this person discovered psilocybin and just would go out hiking, just in a nice quiet spot, turn off the phone, just be present. And it completely turned their life around, gave them hope, gave them a new view, allowed them to appreciate what is around them every day. Things that we just don't take notice of, the bird that's sitting on your stoop, or the breeze that's blowing by that's refreshing, the sunshine that's, providing us vitamin D and all the emotional things that come with all of that. And then they invited me to try it with them. And I was terrified because I'm a goody two shoes growing up. I didn't get drunk until I was past 21, and I just don't do those things. I don't do recreational drugs. It was my mindset. And so I was a little bit intimidated. I was a little bit nervous. But after I experienced that first day, my first thought was, oh my God, everybody has to do this. This could save the world. It was so profound to me. And I'm not a person we've all had traumas. Every person on this planet, walking, living, breathing, has had some type of trauma or experience that they have had to overcome that has changed them, molded them in some way. And it's usually something hard, something not pleasant that they've had to go through to get to where they are today. And I feel like I've done a pretty good job working through those moments in my childhood and young adult life to where I feel like I'm okay. I don't need a therapist or anything like that, but they still those experiences still shape my behaviors today in the way that I respond in relationships, the way I raise my children, the way I operate as a business owner, all of those things. And when I did my first psilocybin journey, I recognized that it allowed all of those pre-programmed thoughts and neural pathways and the habits that we always think this when this happens, or we automatically go here to imposter syndrome or whatever. It just allowed my brain to settle down for just a minute and just let my body breathe and just let me be present. And I thought, oh my gosh, if so many people could just take a moment just to get physically active, get outside, be in the sunshine, just be where it's quiet, get off your phone, get off all of that stuff, just be there for a minute, just a few minutes. And then to allow your brain to get all those negative thoughts to just settle down and quiet down so you can just actually kind of take control for a minute. I thought, wow, this could be monumental. This could save so many lives and get people off of all these medications that are causing all these side effects and causing suicidal ideations. One of our children had gone through some mental health struggles and was over-medicated to the point that we believe it had something to do with a suicide attempt. And so I believe that we could really change the trajectory of our mental health state of our nation with this plant medicine and others like it.
So what was your first experience like? Because I think probably for a lot of our listeners that have not really done much of the research into psilocybin and plant-based medicines, even like myself, and I'll probably talk more about this as we go into the conversation, but my experience was the kind of stoner group in high school, because I grew up in the 70s, that were doing shrooms, man, and it was, I just, to me, I expected just, bright colors and things swirling and, monkeys swinging from trees. I don't know what I was expecting. What did you expect, and what did you experience in that first dose of plant medicine?
So I'm going to caveat my answer with a few things. One, your set and your setting make all the difference. So where you are and who you're with, and your intention going into it. You want to make sure that you are in a positive mindset or positive mindset in order to allow the medicine to do what it needs to do. So don't go in fighting it, but also be in a setting that's quiet. I really, really recommend, if you can get out to a park where nobody else is around, or hike up into the mountains a little bit, maybe a trail that's less traveled, or maybe hike off trail a little bit and just be to where, nobody else is going to cross your path, turn your phone off, things like that. Your set and your setting makes so much of a difference. And also, for your first time, your first journey, be with somebody that you love and trust. Mine was with somebody that I absolutely knew would not steer me wrong, would not lead me into a place that was going to be dangerous or unsafe or scary. The second thing is, know that there are different types of mushrooms. They all have different levels of psilocybin per weight. So that is something you definitely want to take a look at, as well as the strength and the type of psilocybin you are doing. And Golden Teachers is a mushroom that is kind of called the gateway mushroom, which is very gentle. It's very easy. It's very introspective. It's a really nice place to start. And that's actually one of the preferred for somebody that's doing kind of what the three of us did. My first journey, again, because it was with somebody that I knew and trusted, made sure that the dose was appropriate for a, quote, trip dose, because there is such thing as microdosing. This was a trip dose to get you a little bit beyond that, to really have more of a spiritual experience. But my concern was that I would be incapacitated. So my thought process went to being stoned on cannabis, or being drunk on alcohol. I'm like, I have to drive home. So I need to make sure that I have all my faculties about me. And to my surprise, and which made it so much more enjoyable, I never felt out of control. I never felt like I couldn't get up and walk and talk. There is a period of time when the psilocybin first hits your system, you probably do not want to be operating a car. Absolutely not. But if in emergency situation, could I have gotten in my car and driven? Absolutely. But it was very gentle. I did have a little bit of heightened visual sensation. I did have more of awareness of sound. I could really hear the breeze. I could really hear the birds, and I could really any movement. I was like, oh, there's a bug there. I was more aware. It's not that these things happened falsely. It was just that I was able to calm all the other things down in my brain, that my brain could actually focus on those things. And so it was really a great experience. And as I left, just a general feeling of euphoria, very positive thoughts, nothing negative that I recall from my first journey. It was just all very positive and just more discovery. It was just like being a little kid again and seeing something for the first time. Like if you've ever taken a toddler out when it's snowing and they get to feel it and put it in their mouth and look at it and it melts on their nose, that just innocent discovery, I felt like I got that back for a brief period of time.
And Sam, I remember you were a little bit hesitant the night before. I don't know that I knew for sure you were going to go out with us on Sunday morning when we went out.
Yeah, I was definitely.
What kind of shifted your gears, and what was your experience?
I was definitely skeptical. I've had a lot of past trauma, right? So I didn't want any of that trauma to kind of come up, especially with Sandi, because, she's like my big sister, right? So I didn't want to, I was able to be vulnerable around her, but I didn't want some of that trauma to come up and then me not be the same person in her eyes, right? So I didn't know what to expect. And I didn't know you at all either, right? So I was like, I don't know this guy. I'm going out here having this first time experience. I didn't know what to expect. So I was very skeptical at first, because again, I didn't know what to expect. I haven't done any really research on it. So I have a close friend of mine. He explained to me that he goes up to the mountains every once in a while and he does some shrooms and he just reconnects with the world and with earth. And I'm like, all right, that's cool. I never really even thought twice about it. But My experience was euphoric. It was wonderful, to be honest. It was just reassuring to me that where I am in my life and the choices that I've made and everything that I'm kind of doing is along the same path as God, where He wants me to be. Right. So I was just it was all good for me. I was just kind of just taking it in. I'm a very sensory person, so I was able to feel, the wind come over my skin, the sun rays come down. I was really in tune with like hearing the birds talking to each other, and then when I did close my eyes, I saw colors, right? But I saw a vision of us laying down where we were laying and sitting in the woods. My vision was just us sitting on this mountaintop. And it was just a joyful experience. And again, just reassuring me that I'm where I'm supposed to be and I'm making the right choices and decisions by not self medicating anymore. Because again, I was on a lot of antidepressant, anti anxiety medications for years. And I stopped in 2020 when I retired because it got to a point where I was, almost basically killing myself. So I had to make a stop. And since then, I've been trying to pursue different avenues to kind of bring some self healing. So I do a lot of meditation. I do a lot of infrared sauna therapy in the gym. I get out a lot. I bought a dog, and I think having a pet is probably one of the biggest things that can help with your mental state as well. But yeah, it was a great experience. It was enlightening again because it allowed me to just reconnect with Earth. And I got a little vision. I got a little 3D where the bark on the tree was like super thick, and like the grass was kind of swaying back and forth. And I think a hummingbird actually came and kind of sat with me for a little while. And I have a huge connection with hummingbirds because when I'm here at my home and I'm watering my plants, they always come visit me and they always come talk to me. So it was just a reassurance that, I'm where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah, for me, I partly went to Colorado for the experience. I'd been considering it since probably early part of this year, or was it in the last year? I interviewed on my other podcast Neil Markham, who's the CEO of Beckley Retreats, which does very controlled psychological psilocybin assisted therapy retreats. And I got really fascinated and interested with it. Sandi also had introduced me, and we've had him on this podcast. Des, the pastor of the Colorado Psychedelic Church. And, so I was looking at those two options. It's like, hey, I need this because just some of the ways I was seeing myself failing in my marriage and my parenting and those types of things, I wanted kind of that awakening, kind of God show me what I need to change kind of thing. And that's sort of what I went into it thinking was going to happen. And so when Sandi invited me out for the Colorado Springs Health and Fitness Expo, we'll give a little plug for that. And I intend to be back there next year. It was like, okay, great. I'm going to kill two birds with one stone. I get to meet these friends that I've had for, Sandi pointed out, almost 15 years, and we've never met in person. Got to kind of meet in person, meet some other people, have that social interaction. But I also got to then kind of dip my toes in the water of, psilocybin assisted self-therapy in this case. And so I didn't have necessarily apprehensions about doing it, but I had no idea what to expect. And I think part of what I was expecting was this profound, God speaking to me in a voice, this is what you need to do. And then on the other hand is just that kind of psychedelic, trippy experience. And it was neither of them. And I found myself as I was laying there and I felt like almost like I was pushing for that profound voice in my head. And it was just like, no, dude, just relax and follow this. And got up at one point to use the restroom and I realized just how brighter the colors were and the depth of clarity that I was seeing. And it was opening up my perceptions. And I still feel a bit more perceptive. I mean, obviously, as I walk around now, the colors aren't quite as bright as they were and intense as they were, but it just really opened my eyes up to being present in the moment. And then Sam, you mentioned about the hummingbird, and Sandy had told us that, be aware that, the hummingbirds are up there and they're going to connect with you and they're going to kind of get in your face. And when y'all reacted to the hummingbird, I felt just a moment of jealousy. I was like, I want that. And I'm like, no, wait, that's Sam's experience. That's for Sam to have. I'm having my own experience. And to me, that was a very spiritual moment, because it's like, again, this isn't about me. It's about the spiritual connection and, getting to know you both better, but in a way that was different than sitting there chatting with one another. And it was wild, because I remember at one point, I just kind of opened my eyes, because I would open my eyes, close my eyes. And, when I closed my eyes, I'd kind of see a little bit of that color. I remember seeing this very vibrant blue color, just that natural, the sunlight going through your eyelids, but it was more profound colors. But I opened my eyes, and at one point I see you, Sam, walk, and it was like you appeared from this tree, and you just kind of walked out from the tree. And I just caught that with the corner of my eye, and there was just this sense of peace and just like joy that just came from that. And it was a very fascinating experience, and I think it's one that, I think that first experience is always probably got to be the greatest one when you do, something like your first psilocybin trip. And I hate using the word trip, because it almost sounds, again, like the hippy dippy drug tripping kind of experience, but it was really, to me, a much more profound spiritual experience.
And I think that's another thing that I recognize kind of in that, like, bringing back that childhood discovery and that childhood awe, is it allowed me to get out of my own way. I think all of us kind of fall into that category where we're very high performers. Our brain is always going, we're always making lists. How can we improve? What do we got to do next? And all the things that have us all up here all the time buzzing. And it allows that to just like calm down, settle down. We don't have to be there, and it's not a competition. I don't have to be the best today. Yes, I want to be the best in my business and in my, in the way I serve my community. But right now, this is just about being present. And I really, truly believe in that spiritual sense that we, like Sam mentioned, I want to connect with the earth. I want to connect with my creator and the creation that I live in. And I really, truly believe that animals know you're on a totally different frequency, because squirrels, birds, hummingbirds, deer, all of those things they almost know, and they're so curious, like, hey, I've never noticed you, but it's like they're noticing this too. Like, what are you doing here? And how come we're on the same frequency right now? But it's really almost every time that I do a psilocybin journey, there is some animal presence that wouldn't normally be there had we just been up there having a picnic, for example.
Sam, what do you want to add to that? Tell us about your hummingbird experience.
It was great. But what's even crazier is I remember you stood up and you were mentioning how you saw the deer. There was a deer, and I guess the doe or the baby deer, right? And then you mentioned, I can see his eyeballs and he's looking at me. And I explained to you, I see more when I have my eyes closed than when I had them open, right? So our experience was totally different, but we were meant to you were meant to see what you saw, right? I was meant to have that reassurance that I needed to make me feel confident in my choices and my path and, where I'm going. But I think the setting, it was huge. Being there with somebody that you feel safe, right? And you feel vulnerable with, because again, like, I didn't know you, Jeff. So like, I was a little skeptical because I don't know this guy, right? Like, I don't know what your trip's going to be like either, right? I don't know what you're capable of. So I wanted to make sure I was in a safe space. So I think having that safe space, being in nature, I think it was a point where I was laying down and feeling my heart, and I can actually feel the earth kind of pulsing with me, with my heart at the same time. Like, it was really like mind blowing, but that was my experience,
Yeah, the deer that was awesome for me. And, I wear contacts, but my vision isn't perfect with the contacts, just because one eye is a little bit different, and, it never gives me perfect focus. I usually have to like kind of think my way. Like if I'm reading letters from a really far distance, I can figure them out because I know enough that what letters should go in order. But that was amazing because from that distance that deer was looking at me, I know I ordinarily would not have been able to see the eyeballs. And just to not only see them, as Sandi mentioned, that connection that they're looking at me and they're looking deep into me, not just, okay, is this guy something I should be worried about? There was a connection there. And it was wild. And even just to be able to see flowers on the hillside far away from us that I normally wouldn't have been able to see, just with that detail and the brightness of the colors. And then when the deers finally did go to take off, it was funny because the mother ran down the hill and the doe, the fawn was just kind of looking at me. And it was almost like it was asking for my permission to go ahead and take off. And so I'm just like, yeah, you can go with your mom. And it was just, I don't know, it was just an awesome experience for me.
I think the other thing that I love about doing, taking a moment to just take that self-care for myself is time kind of stands still. I don't go and I'm not watching my watch. I'm not, and sometimes you'll just kind of let yourself get into that place where you're just letting the medicine do its thing. And then you kind of sit up and only 10 minutes has gone by. And other times it feels like a blink and you're like, oh my gosh, it's been 2.5 hours. You lose sense of time. And as we shouldn't, we just need to be present and enjoy. And I will tell you too, that every journey is different. There's been, I wouldn't say my first is very memorable, but I've had probably one of the most profound journeys this year, actually. And I've been doing psilocybin for about 3 years. It's one of those things where I do it when I feel like I need it. It's not something that's a routine thing for me. When I start getting, with the expo planning and everything, my brain kind of goes into overdrive and I need a self-care day. I need a day to just be present and get off my computer and not have to people and do the things. And just, I need some positive affirmations for myself. I need to hear what God has for me, or what nature has for me, or whatever. And I take that opportunity, but, just to be present and to enjoy that is amazing. But this year was probably one of the most profound journeys I've had, where I felt like I got real clarity on some things. But again, I truly believe we're going to receive what we need when we need it, and not before, and not after. And like you said, Jeff, you were kind of chasing it. You can't. It's one of those things that doesn't work that way. So, which I think is fabulous, because it makes you surrender. Again, like Sam was saying, that vulnerability. There is a piece of you that you do need to be vulnerable. You need to get really real and really honest and just let go. And sometimes letting go is the hardest thing for us, especially control freak.
Yeah, and I thought it was fascinating that, Sam and I took the same mushroom, same dose, but had very different experiences, and yet a very connected experience.
Yeah, we're best friends now. We're friends for life now. We're connected now. You're not getting rid of me.
Would it be instead of BFFs, it's BPFs, best psilocybin friends.
100%. 100%.
But actually, that whole trip was a spiritual trip for me, because, walking into the convention area, where the expo was, and seeing Sandi for the first time, and then you were right by her. To me, it was like walking up to people that I've known in 3 dimensions for forever. It wasn't like we're meeting in person for the first time. And Sam, it was like with you, it was like, I know this guy.
Yeah.
And it was like we were, the universe intended for us to come together at that weekend, and especially in that, that psilocybin experience, that experience on the mountaintop.
Yeah.
I say mountaintop. It wasn't really that big of a mountain. But.
I call it the mountain, the holy mountain.
Yeah.
But I believe that too, 100%, that there was probably no other way that we probably would have crossed paths. And there was a reason why we met, and I took something from you and you took something from me, and the timing, I would never have been at the top of a mountain like that, just chilling out, having that experience, there was no way. So it's something that I believe will carry forever, and I'll be able to share this story. Hopefully, bring people to see that same light that we were able to see.
Yeah, I thought one other thing that was really fascinating was that, as we went through our journey and you start coming to the end, first of all, when do I know this is over? When do I know this is all run through my system? But also it was like, okay, I'm here with two other people. When do I interrupt their experience so we were all three very cognizant of letting everybody just experience it. And it came to that natural point where it's like, okay, now it's kind of time to talk about what we saw and what happened. And it wasn't like, oh man, and you're pushing your experience on somebody else. It was, to me, that it was truly a spiritual, from the definition of how I define spirit, is being outside of oneself, that you're seeing something greater than oneself. Nothing has been more spiritual in my life than those few hours of that hike and that, just laying on that blanket, staring at the colors and the deer and just listening and feeling and experiencing what we experienced.
That's beautiful.
So, Sandy, you've done it multiple times. So I don't have to ask you the question, will you do it again? Probably for you, it's just kind of, when's the next time?
It's not if, it's when.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, that was another point I was going to make is, there that day was meant to be. I truly believe that that the universe or our creator or whoever, whatever your spiritual beliefs are, bring things into when you're supposed to have them for a purpose. But I also believe that you have to be in tune to that. For example, I brought mushrooms on my trip to Peru in hopes that I would really get to sit on a mountaintop in the Andes Mountains and really enjoy and experience a spiritual experience there. But the two places that I was really hoping to be able to do that journey, the timing just didn't work out. And instead of forcing it, I just let it go. And I still was able to have a very spiritual experience because I understand being present now. I truly, fully recognize when I am and if I'm not, what I need to do to get there, without psilocybin. And so it still was a very spiritual experience. And I did take time to meditate and I did take time to breathe and sit on the ground and be connected. But there are times where I had the intention to use psilocybin for that journey, but there's been plenty of times where it didn't feel right and I wasn't going to force it. And I think that's important for people to just make sure that it's not a forced thing. The other thing to know is that you can't chase that peak of your psilocybin journey. There is a moment where it gets intense and a lot of people want to stay there. There is a little bit of a body high associated with psilocybin, a little floaty feeling. I don't know if either one of you experienced that per se.
I didn't. No.
But you can't chase that. Once your receptors are full, it takes 24 to 72 hours for that to fully leave your system for you to be able to do that again in that same manner. So that's the other really cool thing. It's not something you could get, quote, addicted to in that sense. There is not a physical addiction that could happen just because of the way our bodies work, which I think is really beautiful. And I think when we talk about plant medicine, and there are several types of plant medicine, cannabis being one of them, I think psilocybin is one of the more beautiful plant medicines that allow us to have such an amazing experience without any physical harm. And there might be some research, I'm speaking from a lay person here, but from everyone I've spoken to, from all that I know, I truly believe the statement I just said. So,
well, I've actually, I've been kind of reaching out through particularly the other podcast to talk to more people about, what psilocybin could be doing for our bodies and how it can benefit. And I did have Nicholas Hubach on, who had written just a kind of a brief paper sharing some research that has been done. And with brain imaging, they're actually showing that the psilocybin can actually reset the brain. And so when we look at people that have had severe trauma or, just have certain maybe mental anxieties or phobias and things like that, that it can have a huge benefit in terms of resetting what's going on in their brain. And I'm a big fan of Dr. Matt Kaberlein, who is probably one of my most trusted longevity experts, if there's such thing as experts. And, he's probably more on the health span side of it rather than longevity. But he recently did an episode on his podcast where he talked about a study that was done. He kind of critiqued the study that was done on looking at the effects that psilocybins can have on telomeres, which are what regulate our cell divisions and are a big factor in aging. And it wasn't solid evidence, and he definitely pointed out to where there needs to be more study, but he was comfortable enough in saying there's probably something to this possibility that it can have longevity benefits for us. So it's not only something that is going to help us in the moment, but it can also have these long-term effects to us that if we use it wisely, it can have benefits to society.
Absolutely. I mean, just think about decreasing your stress and anxiety. How many years just that alone will add to your life? Not talking about the chemical compound in our body, but just decreasing stress and anxiety in general, and how many years that can add, how much less stress on the heart that is, and our blood pressure and all the other things. It's just amazing to think of what can happen. And like I said, there are other plant medicines, and that are not legal in the United States yet. And it might be several more years, maybe a decade before they are even considering it. But to heal the neuroplasticity of the brain, to heal TBIs, to heal so many other, addiction and, depression, anxiety, not just put a Band-Aid on it, not just sick care, but actual health care with actual plant medicine. I mean, right. The possibilities are so profound. They're so profound.
So Sam, as somebody interested in psychology and therapy and clinical practice, what are your hopes for psilocybin's use in psychological treatment?
Well, the fact that we're so consumed, right, with all the things that kind of take over our lives. If this is a path or a way that we can kind of step back and kind of reconnect and take that minute to pause, and that's what's needed, I believe that that's detrimental, to people's brain health, and to get away from prescription drugs and self-medicating. I think that's huge. So I think any positive plant-based method to get people to kind of sit down with themselves for a little bit and kind of break away, from the social norms per se, right? Of, whether it's work and trying to achieve things, whether it's constantly being on their phone, right? And being consumed by so many things around us. If we could just take that time to kind of sit down, kind of with ourselves, with nature, right? I think that would have a huge, huge impact. And again, speaking back to, being in the military with the suicide rates as high as, why wouldn't we try any, method possible to try to bring guys off this ledge? Nothing should be off the table, when you're talking about saving lives, especially those who are sacrificing their lives for, the rest of us, right? So I believe that I think it's a huge, huge benefit to our society.
Before we kind of start diving in a little bit more to kind of the practicality and the future of psilocybin use, any more you want to share about the experience?
Yeah, I mean, for me, again, it was just a reassurance, being more connected, and I would definitely do it again. My biggest thing is just being in a safe environment, being in a safe space with people that, you care about, if not, by yourself, but just being in a space where you're mentally prepared to just kind of disconnect.
Sandy, what about you?
Oh, I always look forward to every journey. And I guess I just go in just if like a visual, just like my hands, like here, like I'll just give me what you got. I'm ready. It's always, and it's not necessarily like a profound or shattering, Moses talking to the burning bush type of experience, but it's what I need. And it's calming, it's reassuring, it's affirming, for somebody that grew up never good enough and being told they would never be good enough, that is so important to me. And sometimes, I just need those few hours, and it resets my whole trajectory. So I always look forward to it, and I'll take anybody that wants to go anytime.
You might suddenly start getting responses from all the many fans of this podcast coming to Colorado Springs, knocking on your door. Hey, Sandy, take me to the mountain.
I'll take them.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate. I mean, Sandy, you live in the only state where it's recreationally legal, and you don't have to go through bigger hoops to get to it. Oregon is the only other state where it is legal, but it's primarily legal for clinical purposes. So I don't even know how to go about getting it here. I probably have to find my own little dealer of mushrooms or find a way to grow my own. But it's still not that accessible here. And we've been going kind of to a family therapist, and he was talking about considering going into getting into using it in some of his therapy, but it is so ridiculously expensive. I'm having trouble talking today. That it could cost people thousands of dollars just for kind of a single treatment with psilocybin, and it just is not achievable for the average person.
Yeah.
And it's important, I think, that it be a more back to nature kind of experience rather than going into a clinician's office and laying on a leather couch and just waiting for it to happen and then talking about it afterwards. I do think it definitely has to be something not necessarily going back to our ancestral ritual means of using it, but definitely not going to either the stale clinical setting or to the in your living room just kind of take down some mushrooms and then just lay back on the couch and have a trip.
Yeah.
It needs to be a way of connecting both inwardly and outwardly.
Yeah.
And I think there's some tremendous opportunities for us to relax the laws, open up a lot more research in the areas, and a lot more people to begin to experiment how it can benefit not only people with PTSD or with other mental health issues, but people like myself that are just a bit more stressed and take that stress out on others, or that just need to connect with their purpose and their universe. Again, whether you call that universe God or just creation, but to be able to connect spiritually on a much higher level.
There are, and I'll caveat all of this by saying, first of all, you need to check the laws in your state. You need to make sure that you're not doing anything that's going to put you in danger of getting arrested or anything else. But there are companies that do ship through secure messaging like Signal, the Signal app, which is an encrypted messaging app. They will ship. There are licensed, in fact, one of them was at our expo, licensed mental health practitioners that also microdose psilocybin for their patients and provide grow kits so that you can actually order a spore kit, which isn't a mushroom, and grow it in your own home. In the state of Colorado, psilocybin and mushrooms are decriminalized. They're not legal per se, they're decriminalized. So having them or consuming them is not illegal. The purchasing and selling gets into like the loophole. And that's why I would always recommend that somebody check the laws in your state and make sure that even a grow kit or consuming them, and it's kind of, you kind of have to make your own informed decision on that yourself. But there are opportunities perhaps for some people, and I will have to look into that, but I could maybe provide some resources you can add in the comments or links after this is published.
We'll do that. Yeah, because I think it's important for people to find legal access to this and do it with the right intention, within the right environment, and with the right resources and purposes for doing it.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's a fine line between use and abuse, right?
Yes.
Right.
So
yes,
it's kind of a slippery slope when you start getting down to, how you're using medication at whatever capacity to kind of heal yourself or to subside different emotions or different diagnoses that you have. So we have to be very careful, I think, but it should definitely be readily available to the people that are in extreme need.
And just being informed in terms of dosage, what kind of mushrooms you're purchasing, how much you're taking, when you're taking it, where you're taking it. and all that.
And there's a responsibility with the plant medicine. If we're truly talking about connecting to the earth, connecting to the place where this medicine was born and created, you want to make sure we're responsible with that as well. For example, ibogaine is another plant medicine that is a plant root or bark from native, like in Mexico and also in the continent of Africa. And these tribes use this plant medicine for a very deep psychedelic journey. But there's a responsibility that comes with that. If you start pillaging all these trees to get this bark to be able to create this plant medicine, that plant medicine is now corrupted, if for lack of a better term, or it's damaged, and now you're taking this plant medicine, but at what cost, and how is that plant respected to be able to give you this journey? And that's another piece of it. Who's growing these, and what is their care and concern, and what is their philosophy on the use of this and everything. So it really, there's a lot that could go into it. Some people don't care, but for anybody that's had the experience like Sam was describing, like the earth, resonating with his heartbeat, that means something. And so you want to make sure that your plant medicine also has been respected and grown in a responsible manner.
So what else do we need to talk about with this conversation? I mean, I feel like we could keep going deeper because we had a lot more conversation kind of after the fact with it. I'm just blown away at my response to it. I mean, I think I was already an advocate for psilocybin-assisted therapy even before I tried it. I said, I don't think I need to do it to know that it's benefiting, because, we know of people who have had severe PTSD and other issues that they have gone through a very prescripted, plant-based therapy program, and it's changed their lives and it has saved lives. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't take much to advocate for that without even doing it. But now, having done it, I feel like this is a tool that I have now in my belt to, take care of myself spiritually, physically, emotionally, even socially, to be able to, be a better person and to be more other-centered, to be, what I would call spiritual. And so I'm beyond advocate now. I'm, looking for how can I incorporate this regularly into my life to make me a better person? Again, it's not about taking it to get a pleasure from it. It should be, again, I think a responsible use of it would be to, how does this make me a better person? What are your thoughts?
I mean, that's a great way to look at it, right? I had such a wonderful experience that I was able to kind of just sit back and know again that what I was feeling, my connection, spiritually is where I need to be. And then solidify that, right? So I had some things come to me that are in my life that aren't necessarily bringing me favor, okay? They're not necessarily empowering me to be a better person, okay? So those things were brought to me while I had my time to kind of let me know, like, hey, you need to kind of like push these things aside. Like, these aren't bringing you value, right? So that was another thing of having that kind of just awakening of knowing that they're not bringing you value. Why are you entertaining them? Why are you putting time and energy into something that's not bringing you value, right? It's not meant for you. God didn't place this for you. So that was another kind of experience that I had. But I believe at any means, necessary, if we can do things to help improve ourselves, our outlook on life, our perception on things. That's one of my personal things is perception. Right. I feel like we all view things just like our experience. We all view things through a different lens. OK, so when you have those experiences, you're actually able to kind of see things through a different lens and change your perspective potentially on what you see. So being able to have that space and have that time to kind of open up that, say, like your third eye, just to have a different vision on how you see life and how you see friendships and how you see, things again that aren't bringing you favor. I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, I think, the idea that we're seeing things through a different lens is very powerful. And I would add to that, not only are we seeing things through a different lens, but we're also perceiving it through a kind of connected energy, being, whatever it might be. It's like my favorite, Teilhard de Chardin, when he says that we are not physical beings or human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. And I think that experience, that morning, that Sunday morning in Colorado, kind of really underscored that for me, that not only are we having slightly different experiences in the world, but those experiences are all connected.
Well, and for me, it's because I can give myself grace. I can calm my brain down, and I have all those reaffirming thoughts and some of the profound discoveries I've had in some of my journeys. It allows me to give me grace, which allows me to give others grace a lot easier too. And that connective piece, the people that maybe haven't had that journey, part of me is like, oh, you could feel so much, you could feel all the feels, you could understand so much more if you only so part of me yearns to be able to share that experience with as many people as I can. But the other piece of it is you kind of know when people have, because there is a unspoken, it's just a thing. And I know I mentioned that before you guys left. Have either of you noticed that in the months past our experience that you just kind of know, or have you seen signs or things like that?
Yeah, I don't think I've interacted with enough people since then to really kind of have, to see the signs. I haven't walked through Portland and winked at somebody and said, yeah, you've taken some plant medicine. Yeah.
I saw a guy in Best Buy. I was in Best Buy, and I'm not usually paying too much attention outside of, I got tunnel vision, and just so happens he's got a huge purple shirt with a mushroom on the back, and I'm like, that's my guy. My guy,
Yeah, I am definitely much more aware. And that was a question I was going to ask you guys. How much have you given thought? I mean, Sandi, you've done it multiple times. So for you, the question might be, how much do you kind of consider the most recent steps on that journey? I guess I could say your recent trip, as well as the whole length of the journey. Every time you kind of partake of your plant-based medicine and you have an experience, how much do you reconsider or consider that experience over time, between subsequent, administrations of the medicine? And then Sam, how much have you thought about, your journey in the time, what's it been, about 2 weeks now, 3 weeks since we got together? How much have you guys thought about, and do you think about the journeys? If that makes sense.
I would say because I've done many, I don't keep track, I don't count, but I've done lots over the last 3 years. And there's a few journeys that really stand out in my mind. The other ones are more just allowing me to just rest and just enjoy where I'm at. So some of them are not what anybody would consider profound. Like, why do you do it then? Because that's what I need. And I don't think people value that quiet and that peace and that rest. And just being present. I don't think people understand what that means until they experience it. So it doesn't sound like anything crazy or big or important, but those are probably some of the best for me, just because that's what I know I need, and that's what the universe is giving me. But there are a couple of journeys that I really go back and think on, because it was such a profound moment, and just a lot of it was like a huge aha, oh my goodness, wow, type moment. So they're different. They're very different. And the next time you do a psilocybin journey is going to be completely different. You can't ever compare. You can't ever chase what you had. You have to just be open and receive whatever you get next.
Yeah.
Sam, how much have you thought about it?
For me, to be honest, I mean, it was my first experience, so I'm never going to forget, right? Sandi, that's my big sister, right? That's my family. Jeff, you're now the big bro, so now we're connected. We're connected in that way. But kind of like I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, my life has always really been faith-based throughout all my experiences, whether up and down, no matter what they've been, right? All the challenges that I face, all of the victories, right? It's always been really faith-based, as far as I'm walking the path that I'm supposed to be walking. I'm where I am for a reason. And I've been the last 5 years since I retired, I've really gotten time to quiet that noise down and reconnect, and have time to really just kind of like just be still, right? Just be still and kind of just listen to the wind blow. And again, it goes back to just taking time, self-care, for yourself. So it was just a reassurance. The connections I have with the people that are in my life now, and the things that I'm doing to mentally prepare myself, for the challenges that I've had in the past and potential challenges in the future. They're all there for a reason, and I'm walking that journey. So it was enlightening, but again, it just goes back to reassurance that I am where I'm supposed to be, and that was what I was shown. I was shown that it was just a light shed on. And again, you said, when I came back, I was using the bathroom. When I came back, you saw me walking, and you saw that it was just a sense of peace, and it was happiness. And that's that overwhelming feeling that I had deep inside was just a sense of peace and just happiness.
Yeah, for me, I think I do continue to reflect on it. I'm constantly kind of checking myself. It's like, I know I'm not going to be at quite that same heightened level of awareness, but I know that my brain, my body, my spirit is capable of being in that place. So I find myself kind of constantly checking myself. Am I at that level of connection with the people I'm talking to? Am I perceiving as I'm going around, just walking the dogs or just driving, doing whatever? Am I perceiving more of my environment around me because I know I'm capable of doing that? And I think I told you guys both when that I got to experience what my wife experiences whenever we go kayaking and hiking, because she is always, I'm all about, I want to get as much cardio in as possible. I want to get there as quick as possible. And she's all about, look at the animals, look at the trees, look at the houses. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Come on, we got to go. And now it's like, okay, I've tasted what she experiences, and I don't want to let go of that. And so, for me, it just gave me a bit of an opening into who I can be and who I need to be. And it's like, don't let go of that. Yeah, you're not going to have that exact experience all the time, but you're capable of holding on to it. And so keep kind of moving into it. I hope that makes some sense. So anything we haven't really talked about in terms of the experience, or what either of you would like to share with our audience, about the experience, the experiences, hopes for the future?
I think we covered it all. I think it's just your experience and how you go into it. It's the journey. I think Sandi mentioned like a dream, something that you can't really explain. You have to kind of let people walk their walk and have their experience, and then just kind of just being open-minded.
So any words for anybody who might be listening to this and is kind of on the fence that, I've always kind of wanted to try it. I've heard about it. I want to try it. What advice, what recommendations do you have for those individuals?
Kind of just reiterating some of the things I already mentioned. Your set and setting. Make sure you're with someone you love and trust. Make sure you're in a setting that is, conducive to a peaceful, quiet, open, safe environment. Don't go in with too many intentions, because then that tends to lead into that force. Like Sam was saying, just going with an open mind and open heart, ready to receive, because what you think you might get, you might not. You might get something that you never anticipated. Definitely do some research. There are lots of different types of mushrooms you can take, and some have different properties than others. Golden Teacher or Trinity are probably two of the more gentle, more introspective, great mushrooms to try for a first time. And just, be ready to receive. Be ready to receive. Also, the other thing I tell people, sometimes you definitely want to be in the place. It hits people's systems differently. So some people, it hits very quickly within 15 minutes after ingestion. Some people, it takes an hour for that to kind of settle in. And I try not to give people too much information other than some physical things they might feel, because it's normal. You might get a little tingling in the jaws. You might feel a little floaty in your extremities. Things might start to look like they're kind of moving in a wave, like Sam described, like the bark kind of got a little bit more thick, and the clouds can look like they're getting closer to you, or it's kind of like looking at something through a heat wave, how it just kind of moves or pulses a little bit. That's very common to have some visuals. Some people do not get visuals. So like I said, everybody's experience is unique. Err on the side of not going too much with your dose versus doing too much. But for golden teachers, the mushrooms that we used a 2-gram dose. And that is kind of a standard trip or journey dose that'll get you past the point of, getting outside of our conscious thought and a little bit more into subconscious.
Sam, what do you have to send us off? And then I'll do a disclaimer too.
I would just say it was, great experience and having a good environment, and just being open to having that experience, that enlightenment. Follow your own journey, your own path.
And I'll conclude with the disclaimer that, again, it's not something that is illegal everywhere, and the legality varies from state to state. The access is going to vary from state to state, so be very cautious of where you get your mushrooms or your psilocybin or whatever your plant-based medicine might be. Know what the law is, obey the law, and be aware of that. Also be aware that, we're talking adults over 18. There can be benefits for younger individuals, but again, that should only be under the care of a trained medical professional. So keep that in mind. But if you are experiencing severe mental trauma or distress, consider looking into, even if you have to go abroad in order to get the therapy, look into the options for you, because I truly believe it can be beneficial if done properly. And we're not talking about recreational use of drugs or chemicals. We're talking about using something for a very spiritual, very mental health, self-healing, self-connecting, other connecting resource to make us all better people and to make us all more spiritual and just make us all healthier. And thank you both. Oh, go ahead, Sandy.
I was just going to say one more thing because of Sam mentioning our veterans, and we need to start saving lives. If there is a veteran on this podcast that is in need of something like this, a psilocybin journey to help them with their mental health, especially if suicide is something that is, if you are thinking about death by suicide or that has crossed your mind, reach out to me or Sam or Jeff. There is a resource, and actually multiple resources here in Colorado, that will help our veterans for free.
And I would also add, our friend Des,
he's one of them.
he has offered that if the only thing that is it's keeping you from taking your own life is the ability to afford an airfare to Colorado. If you can afford the airfare, you get into Colorado Springs, you make your way to his group. He will help you. He'll provide you the care and the therapy that you need in order. And he has saved many lives from doing what he does. And so, don't let your mental health, your spiritual health decline to a point where you're going to do self-harm when there's people that are out here looking to help you, wanting you to do well and to be successful. I'll end with, just as I sometimes do on this podcast, just take care of yourself and take care of others.
Great.
Yep.
Thanks for having me on.